morning, guys. We're going to go ahead and talk about our next and final step of our op art drawings. We're going to talk about how to create value using only crayons. Now, obviously, if you don't have crayons, you could also use colored pencils, but please don't use marker for this because it won't work. But what we need to talk about first is what value is. When we're looking at value, value is the darkest and the lightest you can get your pencil, your crayons, or your colored pencil. So it's basically how hard you're pushing on those mediums. So value is the lightest and the darkest that you can get your medium. Now this is important in our drawings because in some areas we're going to want it to remain light, so as in not pushing hard on your crayons or colored pencils at all, and other areas where it appears that the drawing is bending, we're going to want to make it darker so that it creates kind of like a shadow around the area that we're trying to create that illusion. So as I mentioned before, there's there's a few ways that you can create value, but when we're using crayons or colored pencils, you can create value by adding or taking away pressure when you color. So as in, the harder that you push on your crayon or color pencil, the darker your color will appear. And then of course, the lighter that you color, the lighter your color will appear. So when you color light, the lighter color is called a tint. And when you color darker, the color is called a shade. So I'll go ahead and I'll draw an example for you down here at the bottom. And I'm going to use what's called a pure color. So I'm just going to color normally with my purple crayon on the left there. And then I'm going to color as light as I can with my purple crayon to create a tint. And then I'll push as hard as I can without breaking the tip. And that'll be called a shade. So as you can see, I'm coloring my pure color. And then I'll do it lighter, and then I'll do it darker to get my tint and my shade. And this is something that you can practice, and I would really, really like you to practice this before you start the final step of your op art drawings. And if you'd like to take your practice a little bit farther, I'm going to show you how you can kind of really, really practice this in a good way on the back of my paper right here. And I'm going to create what's called a value scale. So this is a great way to practice getting your tint and then an even lighter tint and then getting a shade and then an even darker shade. So what I'm doing is I'm actually creating, 5 values. So I have my pure color, and I'm going to do this with 2 colors. I'm going to do this with blue and red. So I'm coloring my pure color, I'm coloring a tint, which is light, and then my lightest tint that I possibly can get with that crayon. Same on my shade side, so I'm doing it darker than my pure, and then I'm doing even darker on the darkest shade side. And again, this is just a perfect way for you to practice if you're not comfortable drawing your values on your final piece yet. Do this first, so then you can have a little bit better understanding. So this will be the last part of our op art hands, and we're going to go ahead and dive into the adding value to behind the hand and a little bit on top of it. So again, we're going to be adding some shading to around the hand to make it look as though it's really popping up from the paper. So adding this value is really going to push the illusion that it is an op art hand, and it is a hand that is pretty much popping out of the page, creating that optical illusion. Right now it just looks like a flat hand. So what we need to do is we need to take our colors that we've used previously. So I've used a purple and a yellow, and I am going to go around the corner of the hand, and I am going to push pretty much as hard as I can without actually breaking the tip of my crayon or without breaking it in half. I'm pushing pretty hard along that edge. And then what I'm doing is I'm also going to blend outwards into the purple. So not as hard, not as much pressure, but still blending outwards away from where I pushed really hard. And right now I'm doing like a medium pressure, so not too light, still darker than what I've done before, and blending away from that little wrist area. So I'm going to go ahead and go on the opposite side now and do the exact same thing that I've done to the left hand side. So on the right side, around the wrist, I'm doing the same thing, pushing really hard all on the wrist and then blending outwards a little bit lighter to kind of create that shadow. So now just to push this optical illusion a little bit more, I'm actually just doing a tiny bit of shading. So just pushing a little bit harder, layering over the wrist just a little bit. And again, all that's doing is just creating the illusion that the wrist is bending. Naturally, our wrists do bend. And I'm going to do that on both sides. And if you look at it, you can actually start to see the optical illusion start taking place. So it does look as though that wrist is starting to pop out of the paper. And I'm going to start speeding through a little bit just because I think you guys get the idea, but I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow and creating that highlight down the center, blending really dark around the edge of the wrist, keeping it light in the middle of the wrist, and blending outwards from underneath to make it look like a shadow is kind of appearing underneath there. Now eventually what we'll have to do is we'll have to go around each finger, so please pay special attention to when you see me going around the fingers, because you have to remember that you have to get in around each finger as well. So not just along the edge of the fingers, but down on the inside as well. And I'm probably going to skip through and do all of the purple first because it makes it a little bit easier for myself. And then I'll jump through and do the yellow. So again, here's an example of me going inside of that finger area. Okay, because it's bending and it's dark. Keeping a nice highlight on the inside of the finger, nice and light on the inside, and dark around the edge. Really dark around each edge of the finger, and it gets a little bit lighter as you blend out. And if this is going for whatever reason too fast, because I am speeding through it, you can always just pause it and take it back and take a look at what we've done in the past. So I'll keep playing this through, and I hope you enjoy. Please send me pictures when you're finished with these op art hands. I can't wait to see them.